This is
Hello and welcome to Mission Delhi 2010, this exclusive program only on Doordarshan, which gives you a complete download on what is happening behind the screens as we're ready to host the Commonwealth Games, of course this time in our own country just a few months from now. Now, as the country seems to be gearing up to host a glitch-free event, excitement in the air, infrastructure building up, players sweating it out, but what is it that you and I would expect from an event like this? It's obviously medals and medals for our country, up that medal tally. But how many of us have actually stopped to ask ourselves the question, what is it that goes on into winning that much sought after gold medal? The answer is a lot. Behind every medal that's swung round a player's neck, there is a huge support staff that's working as hard as the player, if not more, to ensure complete success for the player and for the country. Today we're going to be talking about one such very important ingredient without which it is almost impossible in today's times for any player across different sporting genres to taste the recipe of success. In fact, we have with us right here in the studio eminent world-famous physiotherapist Heath Matthew, who can of course very boldly claim credit to many of those medals won by our players. Heath, pleasure having you with us in the studio.
Thank you.
I mean, you've been associated with the who's who of the sporting fraternity. I see a huge list here, Heath. There's Sanya, there's Saina, there's Mahesh, there's Akhil. List is endless. But tell me, who treats you when you get injured?
Good question.
Shouldn't happen to a physiotherapist, right?
No, it shouldn't. We actually try to keep ourselves in good shape. But if it ever happens and I just call one of my athletes along and I say, I've taught you enough by now, you should be able to help.
But tell me now, physiotherapy, is it a preventive measure or is it a curative measure? Where do you come in? Before the injury? After?
It's both. A sports physio these days is primarily focused on preventative. You know, if your athlete's fit, if your athlete's flexible, strong and supple, you can prevent a lot of the injuries. Unfortunately, sports will always have injuries in it. You can't wrap your players up in cotton wool. So that's when the curative side comes in, where you've got to then try and fix those injuries.
So you're not only there to prevent them, but you know it's going to happen. You're preventing, it happens, and then you cure them as well.
Yeah.
So it's a complete chain which goes on. Now tell me, Heath, you've been here, treating different players. Which is the sport which needs you the most?
Well, your contact sports normally need your physios more. So boxing and wrestling. When you look at sports like football, hockey, even track and field athletics, those sports need your physios the most because they push their bodies to the limits. Where the muscles and the joints and things like that are actually getting stretched to the maximum. That's when the sports physio really comes into their own, because our primary job is recovery. You know, that's ultimately what the preventative stuff and the curative stuff is all about, is making sure that the athlete...
So if the primary job is recovery, it is not prevention.
Well,
you assume that it's going to happen anyway, so you come in there.
So that's pretty much what it boils down to at the end of the day. A good coaching friend of mine in South Africa says, I break the athletes, you fix them.
Oh, that's a nice nexus out there. But tell me, boxing and wrestling. Now, how much of physio involvement is there in these sports? They are absolute contact sports, as you were talking about.
Yeah, well, the nature of both sports means that the body's under a... So, for instance, if we are in a training session for just before competition, there'll be a lot of sparring. So you can imagine straight after a sparring session, even if the session's gone well, there's going to be some inflammation, some bruised bodies and things like that. So that's where the physio's got to get in, because there's going to be another sparring session in 3 days. Your athlete's got to recover in that time period so that they're fresh.
So you're kind of there back to back along with these boxers and wrestlers when they are there in the ring. You've got to be there present all the time to make sure that they are in good shape.
Yeah, very much so. We would start a day off with getting prepared through stretching, warm-ups and things like that. During the event there's all kinds of things like strapping and ice and whatever else might be needed, and then post sparring you'd have to assess and make sure your athletes not injured, and if there is anything that you need to address, you need to address it quickly.
Boxing has suddenly become India's pride. How much of a role have you played in that?
Well, I'm fortunate to be a part of a very good team. I'm actually very fortunate to be a part of the Indian Boxing Federation team under Coach G.S. Sandhu and the boxing coaches there. There's Coach Fernandez from Cuba as well. So I'm lucky that I'm part of a very good setup. Okay. So I think from that point of view, it's a good environment to be in, and I think the results are there because of the systems that are in place.
We did see a couple of great results at the Olympics this time around, and you've been closely associated with Akhil as well.
Yes.
And he had this bad wrist injury, and then he had a surgery and all of that. Tell us more. How did it work? What did you do to him? He looked pretty fiery there when he was facing his opponent. Of course, couldn't really make it through to the final, but then you did a fairly good job in spite of the injury. Well,
you see, wrist injuries are very common in boxing. The nature of the game, it's a contact sport, and you've got an opponent trying not to get hit. So a mistimed punch can lead to quite a few injuries in the wrist. So he developed a wrist injury that we needed to treat surgically, and then there was a whole rehab process that took place. He was at one stage prior to working with myself and Mittal Champions Trust a little bit skeptical whether he'd actually get back into the ring. So I think he was worried about that. I think a lot of that vigor that you saw at the Olympics was just that elation of being back in the ring, being fit again, and being able to compete. You were quite responsible for that, weren't you, Heath? Well, again, part of a good team. We had some good surgeons that were involved in the procedure, and then with the backing of Mittal Champions Trust, we were able to do what is very often the problem in sports medicine, is that funding becomes an issue. So you're limited a lot in what you can do. So we're very, very fortunate that You've been very involved with the wrestlers as well. Yes, I met Yogi a year ago. He's an amazing athlete, actually. I'm very impressed by him. He ruptured the two most important ligaments in his knee during a trial match, and he continued the match and won it. So he's got an amazingly high pain threshold, but he came and got some surgical treatment for that as well, and he did a whole 6-month rehab process. So he's thankfully back to full fitness again, and hopefully going to do well in Delhi. So which language do you speak to him in? Both of them? Hindi? You speak a little bit of Hindi, don't you, Heath? Yeah, what is the most common statement you make when you meet them? Namaskar, bhai sahab, aap kaise ho? Oh, that's interesting. Well, I'm sure Yogeshwar and Akhil have a lot to say about you. In fact, we have them with us, but that's on the screen. Let's check out what they have to say about you, Heath. Perfect.
हीथ मैथ्यूज़ जो मुझे मिले हैं, एक टाइम था मैं बिल्कुल होपलेस, हेल्पलेस हो गया था और बिल्कुल ये सोचने लगा था कि मेरी रिस्ट की जो इंजरी है, अब मैं बॉक्सिंग नहीं खेल पाऊँगा। धीरे धीरे उसने मेरा कॉन्फिडेंस जीता और मेरे अंदर भी कॉन्फिडेंस डाला कि हाँ अखिल, छोटी सी इंजरी है, हालांकि इंजरी बड़ी थी, लेकिन जिस तरह से मुझे ट्रीट किया, कभी दोस्त बन गए, कभी भाई बन गए, काफ़ी अच्छा रहा। और कई आदतें मेरी बदली, जैसे मैं ब्लैक कॉफ़ी नहीं पीता था पहले, उसकी वजह से ब्लैक कॉफ़ी की आदत पड़ी। धीरे 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 उसने आदत डाल दी मेरी, और कई बार मेरी उसके साथ बहुत ज़्यादा लड़ाई भी होती है, लेकिन अच्छे दोस्त होंगे, प्यार मोहब्बत होगी, लड़ाई ज़रूर होगी। मेरा काफ़ी ख्याल रखा उसने। जितना उसने मुझे मोटिवेट किया है शायद ही कोई कर पाया होता कि भाई सबसे पहले उसने मेरा विश्वास जीता। वो ना एक जैसे कोई भी स्पोर्ट्स पर्सन है, कोई भी साइकोलॉजिस्ट भी कह सकते हो आप उसे, उसके लिए कॉन्फिडेंस में लेना, जो भी स्पोर्ट्स पर्सन या खिलाड़ी है उसको मतलब कि उसको अपने कॉन्फिडेंस में लेना बहुत जरूरी है। उसने मुझको अपने कॉन्फिडेंस में ले लिया और वो जो कहता गया मैं मानता चला गया।
ये एशिया चैम्पियनशिप की ट्रायल थी सोनीपत में, वहाँ पे मेरे को इंजरी हुई थी कुश्ती में। उसके बाद MCT से बात हुई थी और उन्होंने मेरे को साउथ अफ्रीका भेज दिया। वहाँ पे इससे बात हुई थी और इसने वहीं बुला लिया था, वहीं डॉक्टर ने, वहीं ऑपरेशन हुआ मेरा। और उसके बाद जैसे 3 दिन बाद मेरी वॉकिंग स्टार्ट कर दी थी वहाँ पे मैंने, और उसके बाद फिर धीरे धीरे 3 हफ्ते बाद धीरे धीरे एक्सरसाइज पैर की, और अब तो जैसे बहुत अच्छे इम्प्रूव हो रहा है। और इससे पहले वो मुलाकात वहीं हुई थी और इसका मेन मकसद था जैसे पैरों के साथ साथ पूरी बॉडी की पावर बढ़ानी, क्यों पैर तो ठीक होंगे उसके बाद, नहीं तो अपर बॉडी की नहीं करता तो फिर पावर कम रहती, और उसके बाद जैसे अब फिलहाल मैं बिल्कुल फिट हूँ और मेरी पहले से पावर बढ़ी हुई है।
जो पहले मैं था कि मैं स्ट्रेंथ ट्रेनिंग पे इतना ध्यान नहीं देता था, लेकिन हीथ से बातचीत की, उसने समझाया कि अगर मैं स्ट्रेंथ ट्रेनिंग करता हूँ तो काफ़ी बेनिफिट होगा मेरे गेम के लिए, मेरी स्पीड के लिए, और लॉन्ग लाइफ रहेगी मेरे खेल की। तो इंजरी के लिए भी, फिजिकल ट्रेनिंग के लिए भी, हालांकि वो एक अच्छा फिजियो है, उसके साथ साथ उसके अंदर जो मैंने चीज़ देखी है वो हमेशा सीखना चाहता है, चाहे वो न्यूट्रिशन हो, चाहे वो फिटनेस ट्रेनर हो, चाहे वो बॉक्सिंग कोचिज हो। उसने मेरे अलावा कई और गेमों वालों के साथ भी काम किया है, योगेश्वर दत्त, साइना नेहवाल, जितेंद्र, और काफ़ी अच्छा रहा।
वो बहुत अच्छा इंसान है, जैसे कि मैं पहली बार उसे वहीं पे मिला था साउथ अफ्रीका में, और वहीं फिजियो का काम भी वही करता था, और जो प्रैक्टिस जैसे रिकवरी इतनी जल्दी हुई मेरे को यहाँ पे आने के बाद, जैसे मैं प्रैक्टिस करने लगा किसी ने यकीन नहीं हो रहा, जैसे दोनों MCL और ACL के लिगामेंट था मेरा, यहाँ 1-1.5 साल लगता रिकवरी होने में, वहाँ मेरी रिकवरी 6-7 महीने में हो गई, और अब जो फिलहाल मैं बहुत अच्छी ट्रेनिंग कर रहा हूँ। और ये सारा हित मैथ्यू की मेहनत और मेरी है कि उसने बहुत अच्छी तरह ट्रेनिंग कराई और ट्रीटमेंट बहुत अच्छी दी, और वो बहुत अच्छा इंसान है।
Heath, so that's a lot of good stuff about you. You seem to be very, very involved in what all they be doing. I heard about black coffee. Now tell us more.
Well, it's you know it's the age-old thing of if you're training twice a day, sometimes you need a bit of a pick me up.
Okay.
So black coffee works really well because.
Okay, that's Heath's formula behind fitness. We need to be starting that. But tell us, Heath, I mean, is it a fact that Indian players are more prone to injuries as compared to the others?
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say that at all. I just think that we need to, as a support staff in India, as you know, as physios and doctors and things like that, we need to be on the cutting edge when it comes to sports medicine, so that when these injuries occur, they don't put our athletes out longer than the rest of the athletes would be. You know, so if for whatever reason an injury occurs, it needs to be shut down and fixed in the smallest possible amount of time so the athlete can get back onto the training.
So why is it that we take a longer time? And is it more than just injury management? Is something more to it in terms of sports management in general?
I think it's more what you said, the sports management angle of it. We need to, the processes are improving all the time, but that is the key for me, is that we need to set the structures up and then continually reevaluate those structures.
But tell me, Heath, is fitness a part of our culture? I mean, is that part of the Indian psyche? What is the level of awareness?
Well, I mean, you look at yoga. I mean, it's one of the, it's a completely Indian form of health, and it's a fantastic form. So I think health is there. It's a different approach that would be a Western approach. I think when it comes to sport, we need to look at all the different avenues available in that, and I think that there's a growing sense in India that health is very, very important. If you open up any magazine,
happening now.
Yeah.
Okay, but tell me, between technique, infrastructure and physiotherapy, how much would these two elements add to your task?
If we didn't have good infrastructure, it makes your life a lot more difficult.
That does.
So, you know, having great infrastructure and having good technique from the coaching point of view makes my life way easier. You don't have repetitive wrist injuries, you know, because you're holding your racket or your golf club wrong. And you don't, you know, you don't have sprained ankles because you're running around in a field that's got potholes everywhere. So.
Okay, so Heath Matthew is looking at ways and means to make his life a lot easier. We're going to check out how after this break. Do keep watching Mission Delhi 2010.
पता है गोली की स्पीड क्या होती है? मुझे तो पता नहीं, पता है तो सिर्फ इतना कि गोली टारगेट पे लगनी चाहिए। मेरा टारगेट 2010 कॉमनवेल्थ खेल नई दिल्ली। देखिए 2010 कॉमनवेल्थ खेल नई दिल्ली, ओनली ऑन दूरदर्शन।
Welcome back. You're watching Mission Delhi 2010 and we have none other than Heath Matthew, who's talking to us all about fitness techniques that he's been using on different players in our country. But Heath, I know you're looking at making your life easier, but tell us, how much does psychology and physiotherapy go hand in hand? How much? We heard what Akhil and Yogesh were talking about, you being totally involved in terms of psyching them up as well. Is that part of your job, or is that a value-added services that you're providing?
I think at the end of the day, experience makes you realize that sports psych doesn't just happen in a room somewhere off the sports field. You know, your coach, your physio, your teammates, we all play a part in geeing each other up and making sure that we stay in the right frame of mind. So sports psych has developed as a necessity.
So you mean it's part of the job of a physiotherapist to handle the psychological part, or you think a sports psychologist is another person who is actually required to give a holistic approach?
Yes, because obviously a sports psychologist is a professional in their own field. So as I'm a professional in the human body and biomechanics, having a sports psychologist available is an amazing asset for any sports team. But where those privileges...
You know, Tiger Woods had a sports psychologist all through his career, and he kept saying that he was absolutely focused on the sport because of the psychologist. What would you say?
Well, look, he was very focused on his sport.
Do you fix broken hearts as well? You don't?
Unfortunately, no. But I mean, he's achieved a lot in sports.
No, you know, jokes apart, but when you talk about sports, let's take our cricket team, for example. You see them, they go to a point where they have to beat their opponent in the final round, and it's pressure which again tells on them, and they can't do that extra bit. So somewhere down the line, you think it's about handling pressure, that's where we are lacking?
That's the key when it comes to sport at the end of the day. I mean, we all train very hard, we all eat well, we all discipline and get enough sleep and everything. But at the end of the day, when you're in the heat of the moment, you know, you need to keep a level head. I think Abhinav Bindra is an excellent example. I've been very privileged to work with Abhinav, and I think the amazing thing about Abhinav is how he's able to handle that pressure that you're talking about. You know, he's his own best sports psychologist. He's learned over years that when it comes down to the final shot, you need to have a clear mind, focused on your target, and execute. And I think that's the key thing that any sports psychologist or any coach or physio would be telling his athlete all the time, is stay focused.
So Abhinav has made your life a lot easier because he can focus on his sport. Or is it a sport which requires only more of a mind game and requires less of a physiotherapist out there shooting?
Yeah, look, I think the physio's role in shooting is a lot less.
Okay.
You know, we're there if there are small biomechanical problems, but predominantly that is the field of a sports psychologist and a good coach.
What about Sania Mirza, Heath? You worked with Sania. Now, she requires a physiotherapist or a psychologist?
Tennis is a very demanding sport. So if you look at any of the top players, Rafael Nadal, he's regularly injured. Roger Federer's just had a bout of injury. You know, some of the top players, and if you speak to a lot of the players, they'll tell you, I'll have a great season if I can stay injury free. And Sania,
that's so important for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, they play so many tournaments, week in and week out, jumping on planes, you know, off to the next place, going.
So where have things gone wrong? Have physiotherapists failed and beginning to grow now?
I think that sports physio, if you look at the evolution of the professional era in sport, you know, a sports physio before the professional era was not really a term that people knew much about.
Okay.
I think sports physio is adapting as quickly as the actual sports themselves.
So you see it happening now?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, physio, one of the most important things for a physio is to stay on the cutting edge of new developments the whole time. There's always new research coming through.
So is your technique different for every sport? Like when you're treating a tennis player, completely different. When you're treating a wrestler or a boxer, you use different techniques? Or how does it work?
I'd say 60 to 70% is fundamental.
Okay.
And then there's the 30% that's sport specific. So I certainly wouldn't be doing certain things with Akhil that I would be doing with, say,
Sania or Asaina.
Yeah.
Well, Saina had even said that Keith has redefined the concept of fitness. What did you do?
Well, look, at the end of the day, she's an amazingly fit athlete herself, and I think that her coach, Pulela Gopichand, does a fantastic job. All I did was come in and say, you need to balance the body a little bit better, because that's always the key. You know, we focus on the muscles that make us do better, serve harder, or jump further or whatever.
So you really get things easy, don't you?
I do.
Now tell me very, very honestly, you think a sports physiotherapist gets his due in India? We did hear about your story when you were kind of, you had to really go through this fight to accompany the players to the Olympic events.
Well,
how fair do you think that's been to you?
Look, at the end of the day, it's one of the reasons why I like working in India, because it's a challenge. At the end of the day, we need as physiotherapists to show our value. You know, we can't just say, well, we're a sports physio, we want to go.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you got to say, well, I'm an integral part of the team. Without me there, your performance will be less.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a key thing to do, was educate the sports authorities that, you know, it's important to have a physio on the team.
So it's kind of working out now better.
Very well, yeah, it's a learning process basically. We've got to educate not only athletes and coaches, but administrators as well, and the general public, that a sports physio is a very important member of the sports team.
Right. So now with the coming of Commonwealth Games, tell us now, who are you concentrating on at this point of time?
I'm focusing a lot on boxing, wrestling and athletics.
Mm-hmm.
I work with the sports codes that the Mittel Champions Trust supports. So there's 5 of those codes, with shooting and archery as the other 2.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the codes that we'll be focusing on mostly.
So what is their level of fitness at this point of time?
It's good. A lot of competition is going on at the moment. The boxers have just come back from China. They were in an exhibition event in China where 2 of the 4 boxers got medals. Wrestling is in America at the moment. They're competing in a very prestigious international tournament there. So there's a lot of preparatory competition that's going on at the moment.
So are you seeing this corporate government synergy taking place now?
Yes, and that's very important. You know, government can't handle the immense task of organizing infrastructure, managing athletes, funding all of these things. So the more corporate gets involved and assists government,
things are going to be better. But
better.
I believe the government is also setting up a sports injury center for the Commonwealth Games now. How's that going to help? Is that going to make your job a lot more easier?
Well, it's one of the most important parts in any big games event, is having a cutting edge sports medical facility. I mean, if you looked at Beijing, for instance, we were very blessed. We had one of our boxers get a deep gash that we were convinced he was going to have to forfeit. And through the skill of the plastic surgeon, he was able to fix that gash in 48 hours, and he passed the medical.
So you think setting up something like this in our country would also help and go a long way?
Very much so.
But what is the ideal ratio of a physiotherapist to players? How does it work in your country? You're from South Africa.
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, that's also a financial thing. It can go anywhere from 1-to-1 to 20-to-1.
What are we working on now at this point of time in India?
At this point of time in India, I'd probably look at a ratio around about 15 or 20-to-1. If you look at a sport like boxing, you know, you've got 44 players in your core group, and we've got 2 physios. So that's fine. Yeah.
Or do we need more Heath Matthews?
We need more good physios. I don't know we need more Heath Matthews, but we need more good physios.
Talking about current level of fitness, you see a probability of a medal at this point of time? That's what all of us, like said, all of us are waiting for.
Yeah, no, we're not looking for a medal. We're looking for heaps of medals. Yeah. We want to make a big impact within the Commonwealth community.
So who are you banking on? You're the physio, you're working closely, you're training them, you're making sure they don't have any injuries. So we're going to be asking you, Heath, what happened? So who are you banking on?
I'm obviously banking on the boxers and wrestlers. I think we should expect a couple of medals from athletics as the flagship sport for any games. Swimming, I think, has got a couple of good athletes. And obviously tennis as always as a real...
Heath, that's a lot of English. Give us some names now. Who's the guy that's putting your hopes on?
Okay, well...
So-and-so winning gold, silver, bronze.
I would like to see Akhil Kumar, Jitendra Kumar, Vijendra Kumar, Yogeshwar Dutt, Sushil Kumar with gold medals around.
Well, I'm sure all of them are listening to you and this program. And thank you so much, Heath, for joining us in the studio. We hope your wishes for all the medals come true.
Perfect.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Well, like the saying goes, behind every successful man there is a woman. But here we have Heath Matthew and the likes of his behind the success of many men and women in the sporting field across different genres. But yes, it's time for the sporting fraternity to wake up and realize the importance of having a well-defined support staff to ensure constant and continuous success for our players and the country. And what can be a better time than now when we're hosting the Commonwealth Games, an eye-opener to make sure there's a better integrated and cohesive approach to sports management in general. Well, only time can tell, but we're running out of time, so a wrap on this edition. Many thanks for joining us.